All right, so let's talk about spirits for a moment. So, like, what is the interplay between spirits and the void?
So my understanding of I've talked a lot about soul fragmentation in a lot of my videos. Just very briefly, when somebody dies, there's many different sections that we kind of like split into. So something that you consider as a ghost that we can kind of like see around, that's the ego not wanting to let go and being attached to the dimension that they're in or their universe that they're in. The spirit itself is the life force that is borrowed from the planet and that wants to go back into the planet. And the soul cannot be confined. It's the true anti-material particle, which this is kind of the reason we age, because it wants to shake free and go back to the source. So the soul can't be confined. Souls don't stick around. It's the ego that can form ghosts and things like that. So if we're talking about spirits, I use that in reference to everything but the soul, kind of. So when when a when a spirit is not at rest, it both means it could mean probably usually both. There's some part of the personality that's still attached to the life force that's not allowing the life force to go back into the earth, because it's still attached to its space time understanding or its identification with the body. It doesn't allow. It's not. It doesn't go. It's not going back into the earth. That's a problem. That's something that I try to allow to usher on and to move back into. And ghosts or the ego that stick around. That's also, I often describe them as spirits as well, and it's a little bit different kind of spirit, but that needs to be ushered on as well. So in relation to the void, it's almost like so. It's almost like ghosts and spirits. The ego having attachment of both the life force attached to the body and who it was as well. Both of those things, in a way, need to go back into their own kind of void. So the spirit, the life force, in my understanding, in my practice, that needs to go back into the earth. Um, it's going into its own kind of void. There's many different kinds of voids, but the void that exists, there's a little void around like in this planet in a way. It's not necessarily in as far as space goes, but it's kind of like in the combined spirit of the planet, the combined life force of the planet. It needs to go back into that void, that potentiality to be any life force on this planet. It needs to go back in so that it can be repurposed by nature and by souls trying to come back into this earth and this dimension. And in order for it to be repurposed, it has to move on. That's something that I try to help out with successfully in my understanding. But a lot of sometimes the life force is very stubborn, just like the ego can be very stubborn. So when the life force is associated with the body, it's more of a clinging away from the void that it needs to go back in, that's in the earth. When a ghost form of spirit sticks around, it's something that kind of needs to dissipate into a different kind of void, a void of consciousness. It's almost like it needs to diffuse into the void that we've been talking about, where there's this void of consciousness that's like the supreme subconscious that is around this planet, but also around this universe. In order for that consciousness to be repurposed and to either be magnified or exist in another being, that ghost needs to let go of who it was and allow that consciousness to fall back into everything. And it kind of the void that is that void we were talking about. That's the consciousness that's kind of around everything, but not aware of itself, but conscious, but not aware of itself. Very strange. It kind of goes back to a description of hell in for the Nordic people, and hell is a multi kind of layered thing. It's not hell in the Christian sense, as I'm sure a lot of people watching this know. It's a lot of people who a lot of the I guess you could say the ghosts that go to hell per se. It's not necessarily a place where you suffer or anything like that. It's a place where you rest and slowly dissipate back into the grander consciousness. That is this void consciousness that kind of exists around everything. It also it can harken back to also the so a lot of people believe that there was an Aztec goddess that I'm not going to butcher the name of by mentioning the name, but she became Santa Muerte. She used to be a goddess of death for the Aztecs. And for the Aztecs, there's a description of a womb. And before you were reborn, you go into that womb of this death goddess to rest and to kind of reform, but to rest. I think it's described as cold, but peaceful. And then you rest until your consciousness is kind of repurposed. And they didn't use the word consciousness, but as transliteration or a similar concept. But that did pop up in both Norse and Aztec understanding of mythology. But that part of us that goes into that or goes into that hell HEL space or that mother goddess womb as it's described, that's a little bit different from the life force that goes into the life force of the void. It's kind of like a more light and life-oriented void that exists in the earth, and then the void that our consciousness needs to kind of seep back into, to the grander subconscious. That is that's a different part of us, and it's not necessarily life. It's a little bit different vibration than that. But does that all make sense in some regard?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thanks for that. It makes total sense. Yeah, so I'm kind of getting I don't know, man. I have a lot of weird, strange ways of interpreting things depending on where I'm at in my life, even though I'm not a computer programmer. So you're saying like a ghost or a spirit is sort of like a code like that's generated within the void, something like kind of like that, and it has its own little void with it.
Yeah, I guess yeah, it's very apt. I think that there's a base code. I guess if we're going to use numerology, it'd be like the idea of zero, and thanks Hinduism for giving zero to the West. But,
exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
But
Shunya, yeah.
Yeah.
Shunya.
It's the base code that underlies everything. It is the canvas that is unrecognized. That if we're aware of, we can paint our reality as a magician. If we're working with spirits, you're a necromancer. I never really settled on exactly what my practice is. I just say I work with the dead. But the best term would be necromancer, but a lot of people have different connotations with that kind of not exactly what I do, because some people
certainly sounds cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there's a way to take advantage of those pieces, and so I'm more of a person who helps them move on, or move those sections of themselves move on, whereas some necromancers will try to reappropriate the personalities of people and get that life force or get that consciousness to cling to the idea of self, and then repurpose that as a servant and feed it self-identification, self-reinforcement, so that those pieces of energy don't move on. I don't know if I would say most, but a lot of necromancers do that. They repurpose and enslave those sections rather than allowing them to move on. There's a whole spectrum of what you can consider as a necromancer. And I guess chaos magic or blood magic, it does have a relationship to the void as well. I think that when I'm doing blood magic, it's repurposing my life force, my own life force. I'm repurposing my own life force to affect change in my reality. Very effective if you know how to do it. It takes a lot of practice, and most of my experience is from practice. I've took bits and pieces, but I've learned over time and practice. When it comes to chaos magic, that is more using that, tapping into that base code of the grander subconscious and drawing from that, but not necessarily reinforcing the self-identity of a spirit, but drawing from that grander subconscious. It's almost like chaos magic is you're birthing an action rather than nature birthing a consciousness and a life form. You're birthing that action by a direction of your own energy in combination with the grander subconscious that the ghost or the consciousness would dissolve into usually. And then it's a difference between enslaving what is or just birthing something yourself is what chaos magic is to me. And that's how I use it. blood magic is using my own life, my own spirit that I got from the earth, and using that to enact change. So I think that that's the difference between blood magic and chaos magic for me, and that's kind of its relationship to the different voids, and I suppose necromancy as well.
Nice. Man, I mean, I'm really glad that you brought that up, that you described it, because, excuse me, um, most of us that practice chaos magic or some form of magic of some sort, has a different perspective or a different explanation of what chaos magic is. To some people, it's more of like LOA. To some others, they might have like lots and lots of spirit type of magic involved. Some others, it's like egregores, servitors, and things like that.
Egregores and servitors. I've created a number of servitors, and it is birthing something from that grander subconscious.
Right.
And our subconscious is connected to that. And if we can delve into that, both with, that's why servitors and sigils work very well together, is because with sigils, we're delving into our subconscious connected to the grander subconscious when it works. If you are able to make that connection and that initiation of that birth of an action or birth of a being that exists for a singular purpose. But it is, once again, not repurposing something that already exists. It is a birthing in and of itself.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Awesome. Well, I guess I want to kind of finish up by asking one more question of yours is, since you do work with like death magic and whatnot, necromancy, I guess. So is there a such thing as death, meaning like a finishing? Most of us in the West, we have this idea that death is very negative. It's a very sad thing. I feel like ever since I've lost my mother, like 6 years ago, I've been rewiring myself to see death very differently. I had an experience after my mom had passed of interacting with her on a couple of occasions since then, which has given me a very different perspective of what death is. So is death something like I guess, yeah, what is it to you? What is death exactly to you, in your view?
So I think death doesn't exist, but it's the truest way that somebody can create death is an unnatural continuation of something that needs to move on. I think that is the side of necromancy that I don't like and wouldn't delve into, is unnatural continuation. So we're talking the idea of liches, the idea of unnatural, forced vampiric continuation. So there's a lot of nuance and fill in the gaps when we think about what a lich is. So we have this idea of what liches are, whether it be in Skyrim or in fantasy. I do believe liches exist, but they're very extremely rare, and they wouldn't look different than us. So what a lich is? So I guess in a way, liches create temporary death, whereas death doesn't exist naturally. Ultimately, death just doesn't exist naturally. Everything becomes something else. So what a lich does, basically, and there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of practices and little historical things dating back a long time that would describe how a lich does this. But very basically, what a lich does, separates the soul from their body in a container, but not necessarily like a physical container, but separating the soul from their body. It can be done in an energetic way. It doesn't have to be like a vase, like in fantasy or something like that. But it's a separation from the soul from the body, so that the ego and the life force is not slowly torn down by the soul, because the soul makes us age because it's trying to get back to the source, and it keeps on going from life to life to life. So if you can just become ego and remove the soul from yourself, once again, not theatrically, in a more energetic way where it's an unseen by the eye kind of way, and it's very, very, very difficult to do. I mean, maybe one in 10 million people might be able to do if they practice multiple lifetimes of magic trying to accomplish this. Then you would not age in the usual sense, and you could remain your person, yourself, your ego for an indeterminate amount of time, because I don't know about the limitations beyond that. But I would say that somebody who's a lich creates death in the best, the truest way it can exist, because otherwise I don't think death truly exists. Liches are, in a sense, create something that would be considered as the usual idea of death, because death to me isn't an ending. It's something that doesn't naturally exist. So in a way, temporarily containing, because I don't think any lich is immortal. We're using a lot of pop culture here that gets very convoluted, but
That's all right. People appreciate it on here, so.
and so there's a temporary creation of death when a self decides to exist beyond its use to the soul.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, hey, man, I am excited to upload this. And right now, in the future, it's already uploaded and being listened to right now. So, but I want to thank you for coming on again, man. It's always a pleasure having you on here. We collaborate again in the future, I'm sure. This is fantastic. I've been wanting to do an episode about these subjects for a while. I just haven't asked you about it and talked to you much about it, but it's been brewing for a while. So yeah, I appreciate this. Thanks for explaining what this is, voidism. So if you haven't checked out Hunter's channel on YouTube, check it out. It's named after himself, Hunter Salazar, which is pretty easy to find. Just look up his name. Yeah. He's got a ton of videos, great content. He has content about, all kinds of stuff like necromancy or death work, blood magic, vampire stuff, Hindu related topics, all kinds of stuff, man. So check this channel out.
Odin rituals, Kali Ma, different gods.
Yeah, so many rituals, man. It's pretty cool. So yeah, check them out. And I want to thank everybody for supporting this podcast and bearing with me through my little mini hiatus. Excuse me. I will be uploading lots of content. I'm not going to take any long breaks for a while. At least I won't plan on it. Anyway, I'll see everybody next time, and peace out, everyone.
Have a good one.